plan to unite Saw of black Jews. The Limba people, also known as Black Jews, are on a mission to join their ranks. The president of the Limba Cultural Association, Muzendiwa Marunwa, asked Limba people to identify themselves. Officially, the opening of the association's 51st annual conference at Sweet Waters Farm near Elam outside Makado, Marunwa said the Va Limba are spread across the world and South Africa. Some of our people speak Sepedi, Zitsonga and other African languages, he said, adding that, regardless of language or geographical position, Limbas must support each other. He said that the Limba people had come from ancient Israel to Yemen, and later became traders in Africa. Representatives from France, the United States, Israel and Harare attended. There were also cultural dances and performances by artists, including the well-known gospel artist Rapson Rambawani, Limba. Rabbi Yehuda Baruch, spiritual leader of the New York-based International Board of Rabbis, said he had been attending the conference for the past 4 years. We share the same goals of uniting the Jewish people, regardless of color, he said. Professor Magdal LaRue, from the University of South Africa, author of the book The Limba, A Lost Tribe of Israel in South Africa, launched a Shavinda version of the book at the conference. Professor Rudo Mathivha, secretary of the Limba Cultural Association, welcomed the international support the conference had received and said it bodes well for the future. How the Portuguese arrived to Mbanza Congo and defeat the kingdom. With Lukani Lua Nzama as mother and Nemia Nzima as father, Nemia Lukani, considered to be the patriarch of the Kimbundo people, so it is said, he was a young hunter who came from the sides of the Kwangu River and settled with his people in Limba, locality near Matadi, very close to the Congo River estuary. The African migrations that spawned what would later become the Congo Empire, with one of the clans headed by this Nemia Lukani, were contemporary to the barbarian invasions in Europe in the 14th century, at about the same time as Joan d'Arc, in France. According to documented data, in January 1482 D. João II, already enthroned as king, orders the navigator Diogo Sal to go on a prospecting trip and, the famous term, discovery of the coast of Africa. In 1483 it reaches the mouth of the river Zaire. He comes back a few months later and is faced with many natives with whom he is unable to establish much conversation, except to suggest that I will return shortly and that I would like to meet the king of this whole country. This time Diogo Sal left 4 Franciscan priests there with the mission of going to where the king of the place resides. In April 1484 Sal leaves Lisbon for the second expedition to Africa. On his return to Congo, he waits for a long time for the arrival of priests he had left on the previous trip. There is no sign of the Franciscans. People totally unknown to the inhabitants of the land, the priests had been taken to the presence of the local sovereign in the interior of the kingdom, and from there they were unable to depart, as they later said, because of the enormous curiosity of the natives for what they told about the strange habits of whites, in addition to their curiosity about the habits of the natives, which is quite normal. Perhaps deducing, the texts are ambiguous in this regard, that the priests could have been captured or killed, Diogo decides to take hostages on his return to Portugal, a group of natives of the land who, also by mere curiosity, they had entered the ship. The documents state that among these curious visitors to the ship, naturally an expedition to investigate who were these albino men, was Kasuda, the son of the current local sovereign, Nzinga Nkuvu. Taken to Lisbon, directly to the king's presence and, due to a long time of the trip, already speaking some Portuguese, Kasuda, son of Nzinga Nkuvu and his retinue, stayed in Portugal for about 2 years, according to Portuguese reports, being very well treated at the court of Lisbon. Dressed in local fashion and converted to Christianity, these involuntary ambassadors would have been encouraged to serve as interpreters for the Portuguese who returned them to Congo in 1487. This time Diogo Sal is actually taken to Mbanza Congo. Mbanza means capital in the local language of what has come to be known as the Kingdom of Congo. Received with a big party, the Portuguese find the 4 Franciscan priests safe and sound. The Congo king is happy to meet his countrymen and their son, who, although dressed like clowns, after being enchanted by the influence of Portuguese customs, seem to be doing very well. Thus begins, with pomp and circumstance, what the English historian Basil Davidson called the "years of trial" for Southwest Africa. On December 19, 1490, Diogo Sal's successor, Goncalo de Souza, left Lisbon for another trip to the African coast, but died halfway through, the command being handed over to Rui de Souza. The African history of this time, with regard to African Brazilians, therefore begins in 1482 with Nzinga Nkuvu Kasuda's father, reigning over the vast region called Congo at the time when the first Portuguese navigator Diogo Sal arrived at Matadi. The era of Nzinga Nkuvu, named D. João da Silva D. João da Silva, in honor of D. João II, King of Portugal D. João da Cidade, how could I help be, was marked by many conflicts and divergences linked to his succession, too influenced by his interest in the things of Portugal, strongly defended by his son Kasuda. It is probably this Prince Kasuda who, returning to Congo educated under the Christian molds, marveled at the Portuguese culture learned in Lisbon during the interesting hospitality of King D. João II, who later crowned King Nzinga Mbemba D. Afonso I, transfers the capital Mbanza, and begins the bloody process of subjecting Congo to Portugal's interests. In the year 1512 D. Afonso I wrote to Pope Julius II, submitting himself to Christianity and presenting his son D. Henrique as his representative. The internal differences caused by the total submission of the Congo nobility to the interests of Portugal ended up provoking a schism of great proportions between the vassal kingdoms, commanded by members of the same family or clan, and the population in general. Two main currents were formed. The first, which was made up of those who accepted foreign influence, wanted to change everything about Congo, its institutions, its religion, etc., and was commanded by Nzinga to Mbemba, the oldest, second in line to the succession. The other current, led by Nzinga Mpanzu, the youngest, first in the line of succession, then endeavored to fight anything that was foreign to the traditional customs of the land. Nzinga Mpanzu, who is the legitimate heir to his father's succession, takes his place but is immediately deposed by brother Kasuda, with the help of Jesuit priests, agents of Portugal. Nzinga Mpanzu ends up being expelled from the Congo Mbanza headquarters, having to take refuge in the neighboring kingdom, lands of Muene Nsundi. Nzinga Mbemba Kasuda, already Christianized, receives the name of D. Afonso I and assumes the throne there around 1506. Nzinga Mbemba was not simply a subservient king, he was actually a naive type of visionary, who considered himself a great friend of D. Manuel I, King of Portugal, with whom he exchanged extensive correspondence, under the mutual treatment of real brothers, imagined being able to obtain certain commercial and technological advantages from whites. His decisions must be understood, therefore, in the context of a political situation in which some kingdoms that owed Congo a vengeance, conspired intensely against his leadership. Nzinga Mbemba, who ended up seeing in the alliance with Portugal his best guarantee to maintain and perpetuate his power. It is in this context that Mbemba, King of Congo, even declared in a letter to D. Manuel his desire to obtain the technology for the construction of caravels, with the obvious purpose of expanding its commercial borders and imposing itself in the face of rebellious and neighboring empires. It is thus that, even having to face the aggravation of the conflicts of those who, in addition to questioning their leadership, do not accept in any way the region's subjection to foreigners, Nzinga Nkuvu bets on its tragic connection with Portugal. Diogo Sal returns to Matadi at other times. In one of them, in 1491, he managed to penetrate the lands of the Kingdom of Nsoyo, a vassal of Congo, where he convinced Mwene Nsoyo, title of local ruler, of the advantages of converting himself to Christianity to enjoy the friendship and gratitude of Portugal. This time Diogo Sal brings with him many agents of his cultural domination crusade, including some priests and native allies Christianized during the process of co-opting the Congo royal family, as well as profuse Catholic vestments. Mwene Nsoyo and his whole family are then baptized. Mwene Nsoyo receives the name of D. Manuel, leaving his son the name of D. Antonio. The king of Ndongo is Angola Mbandi, also the son of Angola Kilwanji. Thus, with the association between the Mpanzu brothers and Lucani of Congo and Angola Mbandi of the powerful Kingdom of Ndongo, a new era of resistance to the Portuguese invader begins. However, Angola Mbandi, according to some versions after being a victim of mental problems, dies murdered. Most reports attribute his murder to his sister Nzinga Mbandi, daughter of Mother Jaga, ethnicity also known as Mbingala, with father Mbundo Kilwanji. Jinga as Soba in Matamba, a kingdom next to Ndongo, which she, after her brother's death, naturally attached to her own. Regarding the Shakespearean episode that culminates in the death of Angola Mbandi, a different version of the one mentioned above is defended by Manuel Pedro Pacavira, Angolan writer and one of Nzinga Mbandi's biographers, who suggests that the poisoning would have been instigated by a concubine from Angola Mbandi called Nda Kanina Kya Kilwanji, from Mpumba, supported by the Portuguese, who would have been the true mentors of the plot, with the aim of making Angola more obedient to the interests of Portugal as the Kimbundu's sovereign. Self-proclaimed Mwenyengola, the son of Nda Kanina, was soon overthrown by a popular rebellion that acclaimed and enthroned a woman, his sister, Nzinga Mbandi. In fact, as far as is known, the protocol that governed the succession among the peoples of the region, based on matrilineal principles, was very strict. In this case, the son of the eldest daughter of King Nzinga Mbandi, Nzinga, would have to be the natural successor. Dead this, for reasons attributed to the brother of Nzinga, interested in being the successor, this would be the incident whose tragic end forced the rise of the impressive woman who was Nzinga Mbandi. Nzinga, however, had already appeared in history a little before as the charismatic ambassador of the Kingdom of Ndongo who, in the service of brother Angola, the same to whom he allegedly murdered, goes to Luanda to confer with the Portuguese governor João Correia de Sousa. As was the habit at the time, and the circumstances of this habit are the subject of much controversy, she adopts the Catholic faith and is baptized as Ana de Sousa. A peace agreement is signed with the Portuguese, but it must not have been very advantageous for those in the Kingdom of Ndongo, because it was broken as soon as Nzinga took the place of the dead brother. It is thus, as the general sovereign of the Kimbundos, that Nzinga Mbandi will lead the fight against the Portuguese invader until being provisionally defeated in 1629. Isolated in the interior of Matamba, Nzinga did not reappear until 1641, strategically allied with the Dutch, who had invaded the lands there as they invaded those here. In the episodes that became known as the Wars of Angola, many kingdoms in the region allied themselves with Nzinga, among them, according to the available reports, Kasanj, Kafux, Quijilo, Sambingome, Colombo, Malundo, Akamahoto and later Quisama stood out, besides the Congo himself. The rapture of blacks to Brazil. More or less since 1616, when Luís Mendes de Vasconcelos assumes, in the place of João Correia de Sousa, the post of Governor-General of the Reino de Angola, so called by the Portuguese settlers, Jaga warriors, Mbangalas, imprisoned in the wars against the Portuguese, began to be sent to the cane fields of Pernambuco, in northeastern Brazil. It is known that there were 40 precursors to the Palmares Quilombo. The people of this precursor group that became involved in Serra da Barriga in the beginning of the 17th century, sometime before 1630, most likely came from Angola, in one of these waves of prisoners of war. What is certain is that throughout the long hiatus between 1629, when Nzinga retired inactive to the mountains of Matamba in 1641, when she decisively resumed the war, allied with the Dutch, prisoners of war Jaga and Kimbundo continued to be sent en masse to Brazil by the Portuguese. In fact, this whole period of anti-colonialist wars in Angola 1630–45 was marked, predominantly, by the transfer to Brazil of prisoners of war. Since the whole region around Luanda, in addition to the interior of Congo, was in conflict with the war against Portugal, waged, at the same time, by Congo and Ndongo Matamba Sobas in addition to the Allies Soba, and thickened, from 1641, by the presence of Dutch troops, it was evident, if it were not a proven historical fact, that the traditional flow of slaves, previously sold or sold by local Sobas, was totally interrupted. This time, the slaves brought to Pernambuco became, therefore, a very particular type of people, adult men and women, experienced warriors, perhaps even some members of the elite or nobility of the kingdoms of that territorial context, from the same socio-economic area. therefore, imprisoned after battles and quickly returned to here, separated as chaff from the wheat, according to the harsh laws laid down by the Portuguese crown for the case. A kind of elite, therefore, with a strong group spirit. This status of exiles, prisoners of war, obviously totally changes the way of looking at the social, military and political organization of Quilombo de Palmares. United by patriotism and strictly established cultural and historical values, organized, disciplined and motivated by the struggles in which they were involved in Angola, let us consider, since it was these slaves who formed the population that through mass escapes, started to inhabit the Serra da Barriga. Let us also consider that, beginning these escapes before 1630, these people had many tens of years to settle in the region, creating well-articulated ways of life, with ample possibilities to recreate, even, the fundamental elements of their original culture. African. Between 1641–42 the Mwenakongo Kimpaku, or Nakanga Alukeni, according to some reports, Treaty of D. Garcia Afonso II, brother of Nzinga, therefore belonging to the same royal family of the Kingdom of Ndongo, gathers troops with several neighbors, among which Nambua Kalome, who is arrested and has his head cut off to attack the Portuguese. In 1646 Kimpaku reaffirms the natural alliance with sister Nzinga Mbandi. The Soba of the Kingdom of Nsoyo also participates in the alliance, according to some reports, uncle of the two and therefore brother or brother-in-law of Angola Kilwanji. The kinship relations between these figures are by no means fortuitous. The protocolary rules of succession, described above as being very rigid, determined very determined roles for the king's daughter, queen mother, in practice, as the next king should, necessarily, be her son and for the king's brother whose son would be the successor, in the absence of the king's other nephew. These rules, according to evidence in ancient documents, which go back to the foundation of the two main kingdoms in the region, Congo and the Angolas, were created in the very remote past, around the 12th or 13th century, when the unification of peoples who descended from Cameroon with the people who already inhabited the area. What we suggest, already emphatically, is that most likely, there would be no reason why these rules would not be repeated in Brazil by the Palmarine leaders, even with strong indications that they could be, more than merely randomly rebellious slaves, creators of forms of original organization dictated by the circumstances, on the contrary, a culturally and socially articulated group since its origin in Africa, who knows even, albeit remotely, somehow related to each other and to the people who made up the ruling caste in the kingdoms of Congo and the Angolas. The still poorly counted incidents linked to the split between the so-called Zumbi, the young man, and Ganga Zumba, the old man, involving his brother known as Ganga Zona, uncle of the children of Ganga Zumba, therefore, suggest a conflict of succession strongly similar to what happened to Jinga, mother of the natural successor, and his brother Angola Ndambi, the usurper, including the poisoning incident, as we have seen, and strictly speaking a very recurrent practice in the political history of the Congo and Angola kingdoms. Too exciting this story, isn't it? After knowing it, we can even affirm that, it seems, it will be virtually impossible to understand the culture and history of black people in Brazil without delving into the history of the kingdoms of Congo and other kingdoms of Angola in the 15th, 16th and 17th centuries.